Jan Ozer here with Ken Haren from Telestream. He's a director of marketing, is it? Or
Yeah, marketing director.
marketing director. We were having a conversation about Vantage customers. So Vantage has traditionally been an on-premise solution, and how a lot of those customers are moving a lot of the workflows to the cloud via Telestream Cloud via an acquisition you picked up a couple of years ago. Why don't you tell us about that, Ken?
So we acquired a company a couple of years ago that's a cloud services company. They had a cloud transcoding service, and it was it's a very capable cloud transcoding service. If I need to take files and flip them into some other format, I can drop them in, get them flipped out. But from a workflow standpoint, most of these cloud services don't enable the kind of really sophisticated workflow automation that Vantage does, right? On the flip side, Vantage has traditionally been an on-prem video transcoding solution, and so what we've been working on and what we've been launching is Vantage Cloud Port. Takes sort of the best of both worlds. It takes these service-based actions that execute in Vantage, wrap them in a microservices architecture, and made them deployable and orchestrated through our Telestream Cloud product. Right? So now I can build workflows that have actions that specify where and how to execute that action based on rules. So if I have content, for example, that is currently parked in Amazon S3 buckets in the Northern Virginia region, I want to avoid moving that content out of that region in order to execute my workflows. If I need a transcoder, QC, or standards convert that content, I don't want to have to always pull that content into a separate cloud region or into a separate, into my on-prem facilities to support that workflow. So with Vantage Cloud Port, I can be very smart about when I design my workflows. If my content lives on-prem, I want to execute that workflow usually where that content lives. I'm going to get better performance, I don't have to move the content anywhere. But for all the customers that we have that have either completed or are in the process of migrating a significant portion of their content libraries into the public cloud, this is very problematic. And so now we have this way to facilitate not just executing the content workflows in the cloud, but being smart about where we provision the resources to do that workflow execution, always sort of enabling that in the same regions and in the same cloud service where the content is resident, and then completing that workflow execution as part of a very sophisticated, very capable Vantage workflow, right?
So what do I buy from you? Do I just pay a few cents an encode, or am I still buying Vantage?
So Vantage Cloud Port is really targeted at our existing Vantage marketplace or customers that are looking to deploy Vantage in-house, right? So I still have a presence of Vantage on-prem. I can still have all the same capabilities. My existing Vantage systems can be enabled for Vantage Cloud Port. For the cloud processed content workflows, every time I execute a workflow in the cloud, there's a pricing matrix that specifies how much that workflow is going to take to execute, right? So we look at what formats are you trying to derive, what are the things you're doing in the workflow, and we collapse all that into a single pricing unit that you pay on an output minute basis. So it combines this perpetually licensed on-prem environment with a scalable cloud deployed microservices architecture that's priced you consume that on a price per output minute basis.
So what have you seen in terms of Vantage licenses going away, and how do you manage that as a business, and where do you see it going in the next 2 to 5 years?
That's a good question. I would say there are some customers that are very aggressive about their cloud deployment and are in the process of completing their cloud migration, and in those instances, an on-prem presence doesn't make a lot of sense. And so the traditional model of buying a software license and paying a support model around that software license, we think goes away for those customers. But I would say the vast majority of our customers, we did actually some research earlier this year, and we wanted to sort of, in aggregate, the current Vantage footprint in the world, right? How much capacity does that enable for our customers? And it's a ridiculous, it's something like 1 billion output hours are available for processing in the current Vantage environment that's currently deployed. We don't have customers, well, we have some customers that are completing their cloud migrations and saying that everything we do, we're dematerializing our entire facilities. Everything we do, we're going to execute in the cloud. And for those, I think that something like Vantage Cloud Port becomes the the only model that they're going to use is a per-use basis type of deployment. But for the vast majority of our customers, they will retain a hybrid architecture. They want the ability to burst to cloud for those workflows that it makes sense for, or to support capacity spikes that maybe they don't want to have to buy and perpetually manage infrastructure around. And this is a great solution for that. But they're not going to walk away from this much deployed capacity, and quite frankly, there are workflows for many of our customers. There are other ancillary systems in the media supply chain that aren't going to be moved to cloud, or just that they don't have plans to do. And so retaining that on-prem infrastructure is going to be important to those customers. So from our perspective, the right answer is we should be sort of agnostic to the deployment model. If you're in the cloud on a usage-based plan, that's great. If you're on-prem in a completely perpetually licensed plan, that's great. Or if you're somewhere in the between with a hybrid deployment, we have great solutions there for you as well. I would say that's the theme that we're seeing right now, is that there's,
Okay, so beyond companies having a lot more media in the cloud, what's driving the need for these additional cloud encodes?
So the first thing is that the media is in the cloud, right? So how do I get content from my partners? Oftentimes I give them access to, they drop it into a shared storage environment that I have deployed in the cloud. So you want to execute workflow where the content lives. But the number one sort of driver for the need to provision and scale on demand that we see in our customer base is the number of distribution endpoints that they're publishing to. And not just the number. I can sort of plan around. If I know last year I sent my content to 10 endpoints that had 10 unique sort of parameters around how I brand the content, how I sort of slice and dice the content, what format I deliver to that endpoint. So I have sort of 10 workflows I need to execute to deliver to 10 endpoints, right? If I know that, I can sort of build out capacity accordingly. What we're seeing right now is that the number of new distribution deals that get signed, either to deliver to my own direct-to-consumer platforms, to deliver to electronic sell-through or digital distribution platforms, the traditional affiliates, the cable systems, the VOD packages that I send, international distribution has been a big driver. And these tend to be coming up frequently with very little sort of planning that I don't have time to sort of go back to my marketing team who just signed this deal to send to this new digital platform that we're really excited to send to, and say, well, it's going to be 6 months until I can get the content library transcoded for that distribution. I need to be able to scale that on demand, and not just scale it. I also need to be able to come back to that marketing director and say, hey, you signed this deal with this new digital platform, and this is how much it's going to cost you to get our 75% of our content library transcoded and delivered into that platform, and here's the bill for that, right? So the production systems need to be very flexible in how they can sort of scale to support this. I don't want to say chaotic time, but there's certainly a lot of new distribution endpoints that companies are looking to. It's almost like there's this big experimentation going on, right? How do I get in front of the audience? How many platforms? Is it social media? Is it these new digital platforms? I'm going into international markets. Some of the walls that traditionally sort of bound where content and how the programmers reach their audience are changing. And all of those things are contributing to a supply chain that needs to be able to not just execute where the media lives. That's very important. I want to avoid those egress fees when I have content that lives in the cloud, but I also need a content supply chain that scales to meet those capacity needs without having me to provision or over-provision my infrastructure.
Okay, real quickly, is IMF going to help?
So IMF is actually, we're hearing that quite frequently from our customers. Initially, sort of with Netflix behind it, that now is one of the packages I have to support. But as I have new publishing endpoints, it's just such a convenient way of normalizing what I'm sending out into the marketplace. I need to cut a version of this programming for the airlines that I'm sending it to, for the Netflixes and Hulus that I'm sending it to, for the iTunes, for the music stores. And each one might have different branding, different audio elements, different video elements, maybe cut in slightly different ways. Having to store and manage unique assets for every one of those distribution endpoints in unique formats for every one of those distribution endpoints is something the market doesn't want to support. Right now that is the case, right? But they want to move away from that. And IMF seems to be a great way to enable that. By describing what needs to happen to the content in the metadata, I can inform both my workflow systems and the endpoints that I'm publishing to what it is that I'm providing them. And so we've heard from our customers, I wouldn't say it's an overwhelming cry for this, but everyone wants help with this, and IMF seems to be a standard that people can kind of get behind, and we're seeing momentum growing on that.
Okay, listen, I appreciate the time and have a great show.
Yeah, thank you, Jan.